Good morning on this Sunday, April 3rd, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. The race for governor heats up on the Republican side as David Purdue tries to get a bounce from former President Trump's visit. Also, House Speaker David Ralston gets emotional as Georgia's mental health overhaul wins final approval. And Stone Mountain grants a permit to those who want to celebrate Confederate Memorial Day. Melissa, Phil, and Martha are all here, and Jason Carter is in for Theron. Welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, the debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Former Senator David Purdue was out on the campaign trail with former House Speaker Gingrich this week. Purdue hoping to get a campaign boost after a visit from former President Donald Trump.
Brian Kemp is a turncoat, he's a coward, and he's a complete and total disaster.
The former president said Governor Kemp cannot win again in November because Trump supporters won't vote for him. Trump lost in 2020. If he had gotten as many votes as Republican congressional candidates in Georgia, he would have won the state easily. David Purdue got his loudest applause from the crowd in Commerce when he told them the election was stolen. Some then chanted, "Lock them up." Some chanted, "Lock him up." On Tuesday, Purdue clarified the thumbs up he gave to the crowd.
Should Brian Kemp be locked up?
I misunderstood them, actually. Okay. I really thought they were saying lock them up, because what I had said very plainly in my speech was that people responsible for this malfeasance should be investigated and brought to justice.
Brian Kemp was in the Augusta area during the rally. He's got a 10-point lead in the polls and a $10 million fundraising advantage. The winner of the May 24th primary will face Democrat Stacey Abrams. Martha, to you first. I want to ask you, do you think the Purdue campaign got a boost after the Trump visit?
Look, I think that the former president was negative and backward looking, which I said last week that would not be helpful. But I did talk to a number of people that were there that did change their vote from Kemp to Purdue. That's anecdotal. It's not through, but we haven't seen any polling yet. I think that gap between the end of the Purdue speech and the president coming in, the former president coming in of almost 2.5 hours was a problem. I think the layout of the event could have been better. Herschel Walker was the big winner of the day, though. He had the most positive and forward-looking speech, and I think he may get a bounce from that.
Jason, Democrats are kind of sitting back and watching this. Theron had his popcorn last week. At this point, who do you think Stacey Abrams would rather face, Brian Kemp or David Purdue?
I think whoever she faces, she's going to be facing somebody who's been battered and bloodied, right? I mean, you've got Donald Trump, who is, in my view at least, like so fixated, to Martha's point, on the past, backward looking, et cetera, that he's on the verge of becoming old news, right? And then nothing worse in politics, I think we all agree, than being old news. And he's trying to hang on. I think he's still exerting enormous influence on this slice of the Republican Party. And I think Democrats win for sure if Trump is right, that his voters aren't going to come out in November. So I think that whoever she faces is going to be a good thing for Stacey Abrams.
Phil, there was a lot of talk about 2020. Is that a smart strategy?
Well, I was at the Trump rally, and I have a different take than Martha. I thought that you can do two things at once. You can look back, and there is problems with election integrity in the state of Georgia. I live in Fulton County, and as everyone has heard on this program, me talking about and others, Fulton County's been a problem for 20 plus years. So, and plus, we're working on still bills. But I think Trump will get a bounce. I think insider advantage will probably poll after TV kicks in. That's important. The TV is really going to be kicking in over the next couple of weeks. And so I think, as I said last week, the next 4 weeks will tell the tale. But when you get outside of Atlanta, Trump is dominant in the Republican primary. Now, will that transfer to Purdue? We'll wait and see.
Melita.
I think the Trump rally has to be gauged by how many people didn't go. Last week, Phil, you talked about how the former president can bring crowds of 30 to 40,000. This crowd didn't even meet 10,000.
It meant 16, according to the people I interviewed. Now, yeah, it wasn't 20 or 30,000.
Well,
I don't know of anybody that does 16,000.
If you'll excuse me and let me finish.
Go ahead. Well, you attacked me. So.
I said I questioned your crowd count, but most of the reporters whom I trust who covered that event said it was the smallest crowd they'd ever seen, and nobody put in print media the figure at 16,000. And so the coattails of the former president can be measured not just in who comes, but in who stays away from these same old rallies with the same set, the same kinds of speeches, the same music. and even the same presidential remarks, former presidential remarks, that are narcissistic in their nature rather than currently facing.
Martha, you were there, and I mean, Donald Trump is known for drawing these huge crowds. What was your take?
I wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
So I watched it all live, but I want to make a really important point about May 24th. May 24th, you've got the Texas primary runoffs, which have a number of Trump endorsed candidates, and then the Georgia primaries. We're going to have a really good indication of how important that endorsement is after May 24th. And so, you know, I like to talk about this line that's crossing. You've got Trump Republicans and you've got, for lack of a better word, establishment Republicans. If that line crosses before the primary, it means one thing. If it crosses after the primary, it means another. So watch May 24th, not just for Georgia.
Good point. Jason?
I think the thing that Martha and Phil are both talking about, and Melita said well, is you've still got Donald Trump, who is popular, sorta, in a certain slice of people. And the big problem is that, you know, Democrats are rallying behind their leadership, certainly in Georgia, right, with respect to Warnock and Stacey Abrams and others for whom we've got full support. And Republicans are really attacking their leadership. And when you have a giant gap between the rank and file and the leadership, that's not a healthy situation, despite the enormous, tailwinds for Republicans, headwinds for Democrats in a midterm election for a president.
Phil?
Well, Jason doesn't want to talk about the problems that the Democrats are having. Biden's popularity is in the tank, especially in Georgia. You've got Warnock is just, Senator Raphael Warnock, the Democrat, is just a Biden puppet. You have got Stacey Abrams that refused to even appear with Biden recently. So with high gas prices, high inflation, open borders, this is a huge problem, crime for the Democrats. They're going to be in real trouble.
Melita, quickly, and then I want to move on.
Well, we'll talk about all those things when November comes closer and when we see who the nominees are. But I think if I were one of the former president's endorsed candidates attending that rally, hoping for him to focus on something like my campaign, I would have left there very disappointed.
All right, let's bring it back to what's happening at the Capitol, because it was an interesting development this week when it comes to new elections bill under the Gold Dome. A Senate committee stripped the bill of major provisions, including giving GBI the power to investigate fraud allegations, paper ballot inspections. They also said no to limits on donations to local elections departments from nonprofits. Phil, though, I assume this fight isn't over yet.
No, I don't actually think it is either. I don't know what's going to happen. I've been talking to everybody about it, and I don't know, maybe somebody else knows what's going on.
Melita, were you surprised that the Senate made this big of a change?
Well, I think what it does is it buys them time over the weekend when the Capitol is open, when committee people are expected to meet, and anytime you see a 39-page bill taken down to 2 pages, you know that there's something else that will happen, and it won't happen until the waning hours of the General Assembly on Monday. And I wonder if anybody will even have the full time to read the bill except those who propose it.
Martha?
Well, and there's a big movement not to do any more changes before the May 24th primary. So depending on what ends up happening, I agree with you. When you see that kind of changes, you don't know what's ultimately going to happen, but they could push it out. And if the governor doesn't sign it before the primary, they don't go into effect before the primary. And so you could have that in play too.
Jason, at the beginning of the session, Republicans, some of them said, we're not interested in revisiting this issue. We did this last year, and here we are. So this could be a little bit of that spillover.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, there's an old song that says this butter melts out of habit, when the toast isn't even warm. And what I think is sometimes people are just freaking out, right? Like Republicans we need to talk about this because people are interested in it. There's no there with respect to what we need to do with our system to make it secure, et cetera, right? If the folks who look at the facts agree with that, I don't know that there's no mischief here, right? I mean, I was in the legislature, and when you see a 39-page bill taken to 2, to her point, something's going on. I don't know what's going to happen. What I hope is, to Martha's point, that we let our system run, let it work, and then, Phil and these folks who think it's corrupt can try to find evidence of it, but they still haven't to this point.
The butter melts out of habit. I like that. I'm going to remember that. Did you get that from your grandfather?
I'm old, but I don't know that one.
You're going to be embarrassed when you find out who it was.
Melita, last word on this.
Well, I was just going to say that perhaps this is a signal that the people in the General Assembly listened to the many county elections officials who came and testified against this bill. Sometimes we focus on just what's happening in the metro area counties, and we forget that outside the 5-county metro area, there are 154 other counties. And the Fulton County Elections Department, their budget is bigger than many county budgets. And so that's hopefully a sign that these county officials in rural Georgia will listen to.
It's a good point, because we are in our metro area bubble.
Yeah, I think you're right about the paperwork problem. They were complaining about that, but I don't know what's going to happen.
We'll see. We'll be talking about it, that's for sure. Coming up, an emotional House Speaker applauds final passage of Georgia's mental health overhaul. We'll discuss straight ahead.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Truth is a powerful force. The words from House Speaker David Ralston on final passage of the mental health overhaul after it hit a snag in the Senate last week, with some critics who said the bill would protect pedophiles from prosecution. That kind of criticism kind of came out of left field, so it was nice to see this one actually won unanimous approval there. You see it in the House. Jason, to you first, because obviously this is an issue that is just near and dear to your grandmother's heart.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Lori. And, you know, and Melita's mentioned this before, but my grandmother spent 50 years of her life talking about mental health, starting in Georgia, right, when my grandfather was running for governor in 1970. And to see so much bipartisan support around this issue, around building parity, around eliminating the stigma. You know, COVID has been brutal for a host of reasons, but the mental health impact of it is the one that's going to be the most lingering, the most difficult. And so I'm glad to see people come together to deal with this issue.
Phil, it was nice to see.
Well, I agree with that, and I think it was also a tribute to how the legislative process does work, because you did have people that actually read the bill. You remember some House members said, "I never read the bill, I just voted for it." Well, that's not good government, obviously. So you had the power of actually people coming to their legislators, and you heard me say last week, I don't want anything to do with the left-wing World Health Organization, and so they stripped that language out of there. So, but I think it's good, and I want to say something about Kevin Tanner, the former representative. He did a study committee over the last 2 years. That was so helpful to get this bill through.
It was. It speaks to the legislative process, as you said. Melita.
Well, that study committee was instrumental in developing the entire bill, and Kevin Tanner has been right alongside the two House sponsors of the bill after Speaker Ralston, Todd Jones and Mary Margaret Oliver, pushing the bill, answering questions, going to all the meetings, and the Senate did a deliberative process, but they did a good job of giving a hearing even when the people outside their committee hearing room were unhinged. So it is a good example of how the legislative process could and should work more often.
And Martha, you know, it won't solve every problem, right, when it comes to mental health, but it's a good starting point.
That's exactly right. It's a good starting point addressing some of the issues related to health insurance. And again, another shout out to Kevin Tanner, because he was a law enforcement background. He saw this in real time, you know, how law enforcement was having to deal with this and how to fix some of these problems. So I feel really good about it because they got some of the bad language out, but it still kept the bill intact for what it was trying to do.
Okay, let's move on, because gaming moved forward this week, and not just sports betting, Phil.
That's right. You know, I'm glad you're calling it gaming rather than gambling.
All right, gambling, gaming.
You've shocked me the other day. But anyhow, I think you're going to see a constitutional pass, because in the state of Georgia, the only gambling allowed is the lottery. And so there's nothing specific in this. It's not horse racing. It's not anything specific, but that would open the door.
Jason, when you were down there, you know that every year this was going to be the year.
I mean, I'm, you know, my other grandfather, as we said, Beverly Langford, voted against the lottery because, you know, he thought it was gambling. And you know, it's amazing how far we have come. I don't know what or how. When I was there, even there were so many elements within the Republican Party that would have said no way to this. I don't know where those elements are now. I don't know what it means politically, but it's certainly something that I'm surprised by, and we'll see how it unfolds.
Martha.
Well, the vote hasn't happened yet, so we'll have to see how all that goes, because those factions that have been opposed to it in the past are still opposed to it. But I think it's going to be a more stripped-down version. We're talking about that a lot with some of these legislators, that it may just be the sports betting part of it and not, you know, the whole casino gambit kind of thing.
What do you think, Melita? Will we just see sports betting, or will we see it a little bit wider than that?
I'm not sure what we'll see, but I can guarantee that if we have a ballot measure on the November ballot will have a lot of TV ads, a lot of newspaper letters to the editor, a lot of ministers riled up from the pulpit. It'll make the summer even more interesting.
As if we don't have enough issues to discuss, right? Well, lawmakers looking into tax credits floated the idea of possibly capping the film tax credit at $900 million annually and making them non-transferable. Martha, do lawmakers really want to mess with these tax credits since they brought so much of the industry to Georgia?
Yeah, I don't think that it's going to be successful. I heard the speaker comment on it today. Why would we want to, break something that's not broken? And so I think that, I think this is going to go forward the way it is with no changes.
Phil, I know you've been critical of some of these tax credits. Is it time to look at the film industry and what they're getting?
I would. I think there was some good talk from some critics about, a lot of the outer staters are making money and it's not coming back to Georgia when it comes to the licensing.
They sell them.
That's right. And so I was a little surprised that wouldn't get bipartisan support, but it looks like, Martha, they are going to keep it the way it is.
Yeah. Melita.
Maybe not just look at the film industry tax credits, but look at all of the tax credits for all kinds of incentives. There's a growing sense in some circles that funding stadiums for billionaire sports teams, there's a growing sense that not all of the industry tax credits when a new plant comes to town are justified. So if you're going to look at one tax credit, look at all of them as a whole package, as the whole quilt of tax credits, and see which ones still make sense, which ones need to be trimmed, and which ones need to be eliminated.
All right, we'll leave it there.
That
Thanks,
makes
everybody.
sense. Yeah.
Wait. Phil, Melita,
We agree on something. Write that down, Jason.
Yeah, I took note.
Okay, good. Up next, state officials grant a permit to those who want to celebrate Confederate Memorial Day at Stone Mountain Park. We'll discuss after the break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
After denying a similar permit last year, state officials have granted a request to a group that wants to celebrate Confederate Memorial Day next month at Stone Mountain Park. The AJC reports the CEO for the Memorial Association, Bill Stevens, said they had to consider First Amendment rights and state law when making this decision. We'll run the table on this one. Martha, we'll start with you.
I mean, this group is a legitimate group. It is a free speech issue. It may be uncomfortable for some people, but we grant permits for groups all the time that might not align with certain viewpoints. So I don't think it's a problem. We'll see. I mean, hopefully there's nothing that comes along with it that's negative, but I think from a free speech standpoint, it had to be approved.
I think the key is to keep this one peaceful, right?
Yes.
Jason?
Well, surely peaceful, but also, to Martha's point, protections on free speech are only needed really when it's unpopular speech.
That's
right. That's why we have a constitution. That's why we support that. That's why people have to stand up for the right of unpopular people to give their talks. Now, my question is whether the former president's going to be there. I don't know. President Trump, do you think he'll be there?
No, this is just a ceremony by the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and I agree with Martha and Jason that it's a First Amendment issue. Bill Stevens, the CEO, is right. Sadly, the liberal news media likes to stir it up and say all these hateful things, but I think that it should be peaceful.
Melita.
Well, it has been a small crowd for this gathering in the past, and I think it's probably going to be a smaller crowd even this year, and just ignore them and hope they'll go away.
All right, well, the sole finalist to replace Richard Barron as head of Fulton County elections withdrew his name from consideration. Melita, the primary is May 24th, and it looks like Fulton County, well, they won't have a permanent elections chief.
That is true, and that is not a good thing. And I think that the Fulton County Elections Board has become, the process of elections in Fulton County has become so politicized, it may be very hard to fill this spot. I mean, not everybody wants a job where they're going to get death threats, and not everybody wants a job where they're looking over their shoulder for a state takeover, looking over their shoulder to see what the next big headline is going to be. So I wish Kathy Willard well as the new chair of that board in finding a good candidate and having a smooth election process both in May and in November.
Phil, here we go again. I mean, to Melita's point, who would want this job?
Well, I think you're making a good argument for why we have a law where the state, if it deems necessary, could take over a dysfunctional county like Fulton County. We're just glad Richard Barron is gone, the disgraced former elections chief of Fulton County. He presided over a mess. And so, yeah, they should search for somebody, but I think the fact that it's had such a horrible record, I think the state should take it over.
Jason?
I think it's really irresponsible for people to throw bombs with respect to our election system. And I think this is an example, as Melita said, of what happens when you politicize the system itself. People can, and you know, with the Carter Center has observed elections in 110 different places. And when you lose faith in the system itself, it's very hard to build that back. And so I think everybody needs to be careful to stick to the facts, to talk about exactly what did and didn't happen, and not throw out things like, oh, it's been corrupt for 20 years or whatever. Bring the evidence. We have rule of law. If there is evidence, bring it and take it to court. And if not, then we need to be real careful how we talk about this, or we're going to be in the kind of situation
we
that
have
we're in now.
evidence that it's been corrupt and mismanaged for 20 years.
Take it to court.
We have. It has
never
been.
won.
Heck yeah, we have.
Look, I think that what we've got to look at is like what happened in Florida after the 2000 election. They instituted some changes. They took over Broward County, and in the last election, they had the results in by 9:30, and no one has questioned what happened. They had a system that was very questioned at that time after the 2000 election. So I think that's what we're going to see here. Either someone will be put in this position, and there will be somebody who will be willing to take it on that will look at it as an opportunity. But if they don't, then we've got a process now to put in place so that we can straighten things out and move on.
Phil, what about, though, this thought from Jason where, you know, if you keep throwing these bombs, quote unquote bombs, and you keep questioning the system, people lose faith. And then you had several Republicans who just stayed home because they didn't believe in the system.
Well, it is sad, and there's accusations obviously that are hurled by both sides, but you do have record over the last 20 years in Fulton County and other counties in Georgia, people voting out of district. The Secretary of State's office have found people voting out of district. Sometimes you don't even have to go to court to just expose it and then try to purge the ballots. But anyhow, I think that you've got right now in Fulton County an elections board dominated by Democrats. Our colleague Kathy Woolard just chairs the board. It's dominated by Democrats. So it'd be nice if we had somebody neutral that was chair of that board, but we don't.
I mean, I just think someone like Kathy Woolard, I don't think you would question her desire to have an honest and fair election. I think that the question is, what is it that's going on and how we talk about it? And I just think we all need to be very, very careful, all of us. And I wasn't saying you throw bombs. I wasn't saying you throw bombs. You might think you do. But my point is that there is a system in place that will make sure that we have elections that are good. And I believe in it, and I think we all have to. And as soon as you stop, then we get a real problem.
I want to believe in it just real quick, but Kathy Woolard, our colleague and friend, she actually thought Stacey Abrams won the 2018 election. Now, how do you have confidence in that?
Melita.
I think we should give Kathy Woolard the opportunity to run her first election in May. And then the Fulton County Commission needs to look at the budget for that department, which currently spends about $38 million, and she has said it may need to be $53 million. So she needs to be empowered with the money to run a good election and given the opportunity to show her leadership, which we all know she is a very capable and competent leader.
And we'll be watching and discussing. Thank you. We'll leave it there. Coming up, winners and losers, everyone. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Well, my winner this week, Bearings Bike Works. I had the chance to go down and learn about this nonprofit on the Beltline in Southwest Atlanta. Mike and Becky O'Mara, they watch the show. They have a great program that teaches kids life skills and how to put a bike together. Kids earn a bike by putting it together themselves, and it's an incredible program. Congratulations to them and all of the kids that they're helping. Phil, over to you. Masters Week.
Masters Week is my winner. I'm wearing my tie, Lori. I'm going to be going to Augusta, and of course it is the hottest ticket in the sports world right now.
It is.
And so I think I've got a couple losers, though, and that is our Democratic Senators, Warnock and Ossoff. You know, there's an open borders problem that the Democrats and the Biden administration refuses to address. There's no plan. 7,000 coming in every day of illegals. It's shocking, and I don't hear anything from Ossoff and Warnock at all.
Melita.
My winner this week might be surprising coming from me, but Spellman and Morehouse and all of those involved in the collaboration with a new Ralph Lauren collection, which is inspired by vintage photographs, is a real winner in my book. And the 30-minute video featuring interviews with college alumni and officials is pretty priceless. It's really amazing how much I learned by watching that. And then I want to say that Atlanta's philanthropic and arts community lost a great visionary who is a talented photographer in her own right with the death of Lucinda Bunnan. She endowed the High Museum with an amazing photography collection.
Great, thank you. And Jason?
My winner this week is Susan Barber, who's a teacher at Atlanta Public Schools, also taught in Coweta County. She's written the book on teaching AP literature and teaching in Coweta, teaching in Atlanta. She understands those communities, and I just hope that politicians stay out of the way of getting in her classroom because she does a great job.
Nice. And Martha?
And we remember Roy Roberts, who passed this week. He was a great GOP activist that had this fantastic Memorial Day picnic every year that just everybody who was anybody went to. He also played for Kentucky basketball back in the day,
Nice.
so we remember him. And my winner is Herschel Walker this week for giving a positive speech at the Trump rally and continuing that message throughout the week.
He didn't get a lot of coverage on that because I think it was overshadowed.
Because it was positive.
It was overshadowed by
was
Purdue
positive.
and Kemp. So, all right, we'll be talking about that in the coming weeks. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. We will see you again next week. Bye-bye.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.